Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving into one of the biggest puzzles in global politics. In a world where there's no single boss, why does anyone bother to cooperate? Why do countries follow the rules? Let's break it down.
Okay, so let's just jump right into it. Think about it. We see countries signing treaties, joining all sorts of organizations, following international law, but there's no global police force to make them do it. So what's really going on here? Why isn't it just a total free-for-all?
First things first, we've got to get one really important word right. When you hear scholars in this field talk about anarchy, they're not picturing some kind of Mad Max movie. Not at all. It simply means there's no central world government that can boss everyone around. There's no global 911 you can call if another country breaks a promise.
And that very fact that we're in a state of anarchy is what makes this whole thing so fascinating. If every single country is ultimately on its own, focused on its own survival, why on earth would they choose to cooperate through big institutions like the United Nations or the World Trade Organization? That is the core mystery we're going to unravel today.
To get to the bottom of it, there are basically three competing explanations. So let's start with the first one, which argues that when you boil it all down, it's really just about power and pure self-interest.
This is what's known as the realist perspective. You can think of realists as the ultimate skeptics in international relations. They see a world where every state is in a self-help system, meaning you can only count on yourself. So they're constantly worried about who's getting more powerful. They are obsessed with something called relative gains. It's not just about, am I doing okay? It's, am I doing better than you? From this viewpoint, any cooperation is going to be fragile and temporary, because it's all driven by fear.
So, if everyone is so paranoid, how does any kind of order even happen? Well, this theory points to something called hegemonic stability. The basic idea is that a single dominant superpower, a hegemon, steps up and basically makes the rules. The classic example is the United States after World War II. It built institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, first and foremost to help itself. But in doing so, it also created stability for pretty much everyone else. And then that hegemon uses a mix of carrots and sticks, threats and rewards, to get all the other countries to play by its rules.
But what if it's not just about who has the biggest muscles? Our next explanation looks at the world through a completely different lens. It argues that what really matters isn't the biggest stick, but the rulebook that everyone has agreed to use.
And this right here is a really fundamental shift in thinking. While the realists are stuck on a zero-sum game focused on relative gains, this other group of thinkers, we call them institutionalists, they focus on absolute gains. They ask a much simpler question. Hey, can we all walk away from this deal better off than we were before? For them, institutions aren't just temporary tools for the powerful. No, they're more like durable contracts that are designed for everyone's mutual benefit.
So yeah, these are the institutionalists. They're the pragmatists. They argue that cooperation isn't about wishful thinking or trusting each other. It's actually a perfectly rational, logical choice, even for selfish states. And why is that? It's because these international institutions work kind of like a good contract, making it way safer and more predictable for everyone to make a deal and stick to it.
So how exactly does that contract work? Well, it's not magic. These institutions solve really practical problems. First, they provide information, so there's less uncertainty. They also make it cheaper and easier to make deals. And they extend what's called the shadow of the future, which is just a fancy way of saying your reputation matters. If you cheat today, everyone's going to know about it, and nobody will want to deal with you tomorrow. And crucially, they set up systems to monitor what everyone's doing and to call out the cheaters.
And we see this play out in the real world all the time. The World Trade Organization's dispute system is a perfect example. It's a place where a smaller, less powerful country can actually challenge a global giant over a trade conflict and win, not because of power, but because of a shared set of rules. It's a clear case where an institution helps level the playing field.
All right, our third and final explanation goes even deeper. It argues that if you really want to understand cooperation, you have to look past the raw power and the rational deals and look into the world of shared ideas, values, and even identities.
This famous quote from the scholar Alexander Wendt is really the heart and soul of this argument. What he meant is that anarchy itself doesn't have to lead to a big fight. The whole vibe of the international system, it totally depends on how countries think about it and, more importantly, how they think about each other.
So these thinkers, the constructivists, are kind of like the social psychologists of international relations. They argue that what a country does is guided by what it believes is the appropriate way to behave. So cooperation isn't just a cold calculation, it's about a shared identity. The relationship between two countries really depends on whether they see each other as bitter rivals or as friends who are part of the same community.
And this is where it gets really interesting. From this perspective, physical things like weapons don't just have one fixed meaning. Their meaning is social. Just think about it. The United States doesn't really fear Great Britain's nuclear weapons, but it's very concerned about North Korea's. The weapons themselves are pretty similar, but the social context, the history, the norms, the identity is worlds apart. And institutions can actually socialize states, basically teaching them new rules and changing what they even want over time.
Okay. Phew. So, we have three really different ways of looking at this. One about power, one about rules, and one about ideas. To see how they really work, let's put them to the test. Let's take a real-world challenge, getting a bunch of countries to agree to put economic sanctions on another country.
Each of our theories gives us a totally different reason why a country might join in. A realist would look at this and say, simple, they were forced to by a superpower like the US. An institutionalist would point to something like the UN Security Council and say, well, the rules and reputational costs made it the most rational choice. And a constructivist would argue it's all about shared norms, like when the world came together to sanction apartheid in South Africa, because it was seen as the right, the appropriate thing to do.
So after going through all of that, what's the big takeaway here? How do we actually put these massive ideas to use?
Well, the best way to think about it is that you now have a powerful three-part toolkit. The next time you see a headline about global politics, you can use these three lenses. You can ask, 1, who has the power here? 2, what are the rules of the game they're playing? And 3, what are the shared ideas and beliefs that are shaping how everyone is acting?
And of course, the most crucial thing to remember is that it's never just one of these things. The real world is messy. The truth is always some dynamic, complicated mix of all three: the brute reality of power, the practical logic of rules, and the deep, profound influence of shared ideas.
And that leaves us with one final big question to chew on. As we look ahead to all the massive challenges we're facing, from climate change to global health crises, which of these three forces do you think will end up shaping our future the most? Will it come down to the power of a single country, the strength of our global rules, or our ability to build a shared sense of community? It's definitely something to think about.